I spent a number of years now dealing with a very dark and heavy emotion. You might call it a 10 of spades kind of emotion. And my initial instinct was to take it and bury it down within myself. Problem solved, or so I thought. Because in no time at all, it made its way back up to the surface. I know what to do this time. And like so many others, I concluded that the solution was to do the same thing again, only more intensely. This time, I sent the 10 farther down within myself. And yet again, there it was, back up to the surface. Now, you may conclude from this that I'm not the quickest learner, because on the third attempt, I sent it all the way down into the very depths of myself. And yet again, there it was. It was time for a new approach. And so I distracted myself with all sorts of other things throughout the day. And when that 10 was in amongst them, well, I barely even noticed it. But eventually, nighttime comes. And as I laid my head down on my pillow, exhausted from all the running, there it was. I even tried so much as to press the emotion clean out of existence. The only problem with that method was that it sent me out of existence too. And even though things were better for a while, eventually I would come back. And so too did it. And one night I was up flipping through a book. I came across a poem by the poet Rumi. I placed my bookmark inside. And now, anytime that emotion arises, I try to remember that poem. It was called The Guest House. It goes like this. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. They may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. I have a friend whose father passed away at a relatively young age. He was the only boy and felt as though he had to become the man of the family. He told me that he didn't shed so much as a single tear at the funeral. Afterwards, he began to develop health issues, namely digestive complaints. He went to his family doctor, and the doctor told him that he was under a ton of strain. He went to therapy, and the therapist told him that if he needed to cry, it was important that he did so. And he worked through his grief, and the digestive issues went away. He told me this story at a time in my life when I lost a relative. He said that if I needed to grieve or cry, that it was important that I did so. It made me start to question. It made me start to question what the strong thing was. Is it this stoicism that so many of us are taught, especially young men, to hold everything inside? Or was the strong thing to grow and to face this grief, to allow himself to fully experience it, and also to share that story and that wisdom with others? I think it was the latter. For a long time now, I've struggled with the emotion of anger and trying to understand it. Sometimes it arises because I have a need and I feel too much shame in expressing what that need is. And so I expect others to fulfill it without me ever communicating what it is. It leads to feelings of resentment and hostility. Then sometimes a person will say something and it'll trigger me. It's as if I walk around and hear everything in such a way that it touches the deepest wounds within myself. And so I have to separate what my interpretation is from what the person has actually said or done. And then sometimes it's just a matter of needing to stand up for myself, as anger is a protective energy. But even when these things are sorted through, the difficulty becomes of how do I communicate it? And I found the work of Dr. Gabor Mate and his compassionate inquiry, as well as Marshall Rosenberg's work in nonviolent communication, to be extremely helpful. It's certainly been a process that I've had to try and work through and grow. When I was young, my cousin and I used to watch The Fox and the Hound all the time in my grandparents' basement, as well as a number of other Disney movies. And the Disney movies are an absolute roller coaster of human emotions. The whole realm can be found there. And as kids, we didn't have this orientation so heavily towards happiness. We allowed ourselves to experience things more fully. We saw that all the emotions had things to offer. I struggled with despair for a very long time now. Fear around my health and chronic pain. And I recently read The Lord of the Rings, and what intrigued me most about the series was how different characters dealt with fear and despair. There were some who sought out false hopes. They wanted to wield the ring for themselves or give it to someone who could, or they wanted to hide the ring. And then there were others who, in their despair, couldn't see things ever getting better. And in their hopelessness, they ended up committing suicide. And you saw that with the character Denethor, the steward of Minas Tirith. And then there were those like Gandalf and the Hobbits and Aragorn, and they faced despair, they faced their fear, and they walked in the direction that they felt they needed to go. The storyteller and mythologist Michael Meade says that despair is not simply something to avoid. It's actually a dark part of the path that leads to deeper engagement in life. And he also says that real hope is the vision in the core of our own being. For a long time, I've dealt with despair in the way of false hopes. And I find that chasing false hopes in our despair only leads to more despair. It often leads to things getting worse. I think that when we're not facing something in life, then things tend to get worse until we get to a place where we actually confront it. And now I'm trying to face that despair in a different way. I'm trying to confront it, and be with it, and be present to it. Also remind myself that even if I can't see things better in the future, that doesn't mean that that's true. Separating possibility from my projection is something I try to do at a daily basis. But what keeps me most grounded is connecting to why I feel I'm here. It's to make these videos, it's to make people start to wonder, it's to interweave this magic with these stories. I find in my moments of despair what keeps me here and what keeps me grounded is that purpose. And I too believe that in our despair and in our hopelessness, we're meant to find the deeper meanings of our life. And that despair doesn't mean we're on the wrong road. Oftentimes when you look out over social media, you see only the best moments in the lives of others. And that's not always the case, but it's often so. We see the trips, the travels, the triumphs, and the victories, but we see very little of the sadness of life, of the hardships and suffering. I think although we've become more connected than ever through these devices, at a deeper level, I think we're also more alone than ever, as the suffering tends to happen behind closed doors. And I just wanted to make this video to let you know that whatever it is you're going through or experiencing, I encourage you to face it, to feel it, and know that you're not alone. And I know that doesn't fix things, I know that doesn't make things better, but there's a peace in knowing that other people are experiencing it too. If you've appreciated this content, I ask that you like and subscribe. Leave a comment in the comment section below. These things give me feedback, but they also help other people find my work and my channel. Thank you for being here with me and allowing magic to be our medicine.